I'm going to begin tonight with a story. I wrote this a couple weeks ago, actually, as a result of a dream that I had the night before. Ah, what beauty! He comfortably leaned up against the edge of a cliffside pool, admiring the scenery around him. He took a breath of fresh mountain air and surveyed the gorgeous, time-worn mountainside cliffs around him. In the back of his mind lay the fear of falling from this height, but quickly dismissed that thought as irrational, as he knew he was safe. Resting his folded arms on the concrete edge of the pool, he exhaled a gentle, trusting sigh. In a flash, the wall he was leaning on began to crumble from the ground up. He had just enough time to ask with genuine curiosity, "What's that rumble?" before the wall he was so comfortably and confidently leaning on was no longer there, replaced by the rush of water following the path of least resistance down to the abyss below. Pulled by the current in a split second, before fear had a chance to set in his next moment of awareness, he found himself clinging to a broken chunk of concrete, a piece of the floor, or the pool floor or wall, or perhaps the cliff itself. The onrush of water made it impossible for him to tell. Fear started to settle in, and he tried to pull himself up. The force of the water made that impossible. He needed both arms just to withstand the onslaught. He maintained the presence of mind that there were others in the pool, and surely they would rescue him. He looked down to the abyss below, seeing a river a couple of 100 feet down. He stretched his arm up in the air and called for help, and his fear slowly escalating to panic as no help arrived. In the next moment, he was falling with the water. So this is how it ends, he thought. His training and healing was setting off a long reserved alarm bell for him not to end his life in a state of trauma. That spelled bad news for what was to come next. What do I want my last thoughts to be, he wondered. Make it positive. He came up with, "I love." He said it, and it was in direct conflict with the life-threatened fear that resided in his gut. "I love," he repeated. With the third iteration of "I love," a great peace came over him. He felt his arms cross over his chest naturally, and he felt the peace of flowing with the water. He was both mid-air and underwater and flowing with it all. In the space of peace, he was even curious what it would look like, what it would feel like when he did eventually reach the river below. He wondered what the water currents are like at the base of the waterfall, what power, what magic of nature. His landing in the water below was unlike anything he had expected. It was the most gentle of welcomings. He marveled at how quickly he had stopped from the free fall and how smooth that had been. No spine-crackling roughness, no deafening explosion of water. He found himself in a pool of perfectly warm water, dumbfoundedly supported, feeling held in a blanket of what he could only describe as the safety of love. All that hanging on, all that resisting, all that fighting to cling onto the old for fear of death was all for naught. He was safe all the time, and letting himself fall to his death opened the door to a sense of peace beyond anything he had ever imagined. So that was a dream I had a couple weeks ago. And it was one of those that really sat with me, like, this is important. This feels pretty profound. And it got me a lot to thinking about, for me personally, but in general, how we resist life, how we resist what is happening. And the currents of life are a lot stronger than us. We like to think of us as personally very powerful or as a species very powerful. And we are, but we are really powerless when it comes to some greater forces at play. We're not going to control tornadoes or karma. Some of the greater forces that are seen and unseen in life are far stronger than us. And yet we find ourselves, and I certainly find myself, resisting what shows up. Like, I don't like this, so I'm going to resist it. And I'm going to do something else. And on one hand, there's a natural sense of why that is healthy. We want to walk away from things that are unhealthy from us. We want to walk away from things that are potentially dangerous and embrace things that are nice and helpful and healthy. However, this dream and this thought is more about things that we resist, and we fight and we fight and we fight. And even if we know it's the right thing, we still fight it. We can't do it. It's not the right thing. And we cling to our old ways of life because it's what's familiar, it's what's safe. but it's got the illusion of safety, but it's not actually safe. And in that, so I have a client who was in a relationship and she was not happy in this relationship. And she was in a relationship for 4, 5, or 6 years. And for the time that I was working with her, every time she would come in, she'd say, "Oh, this is what my partner did this time. This is what happened this week, and I'm really frustrated with that. This is what my partner did this time." And I'm not one, and it's not my job to tell somebody to leave a relationship. That's not my job. My job is to just reflect back to them. This is what's going on, and how can you take this as an opportunity to grow for yourself? Even though it was pretty evident to me that this was not a healthy situation for her to be in, and it was not dangerous, it was just not healthy. And so just coaching her with how do you come to a greater sense of boundaries and greater sense of who you are, and be healthier in your approach. She resisted for a long time. I don't want to end this relationship. I don't want to end this relationship. Don't want to end this relationship. This is why it's good. This is all the good things. Well, this week it was okay, and this wasn't so bad, and justifying it over and over and over in her head. Well, she eventually left, and now she's in place like, I can never go back to that. Like, this was all the things that I was so scared of of letting go of in that relationship. And like, I understand why I was scared of it, but here I'm in a place where I'm okay. In fact, I saw her today and she said, I have slept more comfortably these last couple of weeks than I can ever remember sleeping. And the resistance to letting go of these things, right? So in this dream, I was the guy. I was very resistant to letting go of something. And yet, if I did, like, it was inevitable. The water was going to take me down. That gravity was going to take me down that way anyway. But as soon as I did, I found that I was far freer and I was far safer than I thought. So while these forces are at play, which are far stronger than us, when we learn to go with them, there's a great peace for us. It may not be tough along the way, right? It doesn't mean that every single step of the way is going to be sunshine and roses. That's not necessarily the case. However, the overall picture, this is where the water is going to take us. And if we can let go of some of the things that we can let go of the things that we are resisting. If we can let go of these things that we really need to hold on to because this is what's right and we have to do it, we're able to let go of that. We find ourselves in a greater space and we can flow. We can work with what the forces are around us. So if you watch, I'm not a surfer, but if you watch surfing, or when I learned to body surf when I was a kid, my dad took me out in the ocean and he showed me this, and he said, you need to find the flow of the water. You're not going to fight the water. Water's a lot stronger than you are. Interesting that was a water and this was water in the dream, but I digress. But you find that spot when you're at the crest of the wave, then you go. You don't create a wave, and you certainly can't go the opposite direction of the way the wave is taking. You work with the energy that's stronger than you. Then you can navigate it. Then you can flow. And then you are harnessing something that's greater than you instead of fighting something that's greater than you. So this process where we sit in meditation is one of where we're just letting whatever show up. And we have a habit to resist. I certainly have a habit to resist. If I'm going to sneeze or cough as I'm leading this, I have a habit to resist that. Because it has to sound good, it has to look good, it has to look good on video, it has to be all these things. And I resist that. But that's actually against what we're doing. If I sneeze, I sneeze. If I cough, I cough. There are some greater forces at play. If we let these things unfold, then we can work with it. So I will invite you to consider the things in your life that you might be resisting letting go, where you're getting pushed by life. You're like, I don't want to, because of all these things, and it's scary, and it is scary. However, on the other side of that, there is great peace. There is a greater understanding. One of my teachers says, one of the hardest things that we can ever do is let go of one of these things that we're a crutch that we're holding on to. But as soon as we let it go, the scariest thing that in our lives then becomes ever going back to it. So I'll invite you to consider where this resonates for you in your life. And thank you so much for your attention tonight. Blessings.